record now. And so all of these will be available on the website, solarizethekenai.org, after the presentation, and there's lots of other great information on that website. So again, I'm Caitlin Vodla, and I'm very proud to be part of this volunteer-led effort. Tim is going to thank our volunteers later, but I just wanted to say thank you, Tim, so much for all of the work that you have put on to this presentation and to the Solarize the Kenai effort this year. This wouldn't be happening without you, and it also would not have happened last year without the tremendous work and energy of Ben Betker, our volunteer leader in the Central Peninsula last year. Nor would it have happened without lots of volunteers in addition to those two in the Central Peninsula and in Homer. And then this year, Yvonne and JP from Homer and from Seward have put on a lot of energy to make Solarize happen. So thank you very, very much to all of those folks. And then Tim, take it away.
Okay. Thank you, Caitlin. Appreciate that. And you're right. I have all the same people to thank. And my name's Tim Johnson. I'm helping coordinate the Solarize the Kenai this year. I helped a little bit last year with the RFP process. And I came in at a little bit late, but was able to be part of the vendor selection process. And we'll get into more of that later on and how important that aspect and of selecting the vendor and how important it is to have people that are interested actually making the choice. One of the things that we hope to cover is the 3 most common questions that everybody asks about Solarize is, how much solar do I need? How much is it going to cost? And who is here to help me? And again, working behind the scenes, that's going to be running the show is Caitlin, and Ben Bodiger from Kenai Change running the chat and the question board, and our volunteers, JP in Seward and Yvonne and Homer. And this year we have a special welcome to Sustainable Seward and all the folks in the East Peninsula area that are participating this year. Also joining us for this presentation is we have guest speaker Tyler Cheatwood from Homer Electric. We have Stephen Trimble of Arctic Solar Ventures representing the Alaska Solar Energy Industry Association, Ben May of Alaska Solar, and Mark Holler of Midnight Sun Solar. They're our expert panel that hopefully will be able to answer all of our questions later on down the road. They'll also be presenting certain portions of the program with their wonderful insight of the industry. And again, as Caitlin said, since there are so many participants, we'll need everyone muted, if you would please, during the presentation, and use the chat board to enter any questions. There'll be the question period at the end, and we are documenting all the questions. And so any questions that can't be answered, we hope to be able to find the answers to and get back to you as we can. So first thing we need to do properly is to thank all of the people that did it last year. Kenai, the Solarize the Kenai's inaugural year was last year. They did a fantastic job, over 82 homes with 485 kilowatts of new solar capacity, with a local investment of over $1.5 million in clean energy. They created the foundation for what Solarize the Kenai is now building on. And again, those key players there listed right before you: Caitlin Valda, Satchel Pandolfino of the Cook Inlet Keeper, Ben Bodiger of Kenai Change, the technical advisors, Bruce Walls, Scott Waterman, and the dozens of volunteers that helped get the message out, ran the workshops, and selected last year's vendors. Mr. Trimble, are you online?
Hi, Tim, I am. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. What I'd like to do is introduce Mr. Stephen Trimble, Arctic Solar Ventures, and of AKSEIA, and he's going to speak to us of the viability of solar in Alaska and a little bit about the net metering in Alaska, and hopefully some trends of what we're going to see. Go ahead, Mr. Trimble.
Hi, Tim. Thank you very much for the introduction. I appreciate it. It's great to see all of you online tonight. Thank you for making the time to join us and for having an interest in the
that?
program.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
As Tim mentioned, the program has been very successful over the past couple of years in Anchorage and the Kenai Peninsula. And we, as an industry, are excited that you are excited and interested in solar power. So as Tim mentioned, in my day job, I run Arctic Solar Ventures based here in Anchorage. And I also am the founder and chair of the Alaska Solar Energy Industry Association, of which the other experts on the call today are also members as well. And so we set out to create the Alaska Solar Energy Industry Association, not only to have coordinated industry representation when we're working on things like policy and technical standards, but also so that solar consumers can start to have adequate protections. And so with every new industry, there's a lot of excitement and opportunity involved in it. And because of that, you sort of span the gamut of expertise and quality of work. And so we came together as an industry to ensure that you as consumers would have adequate rights and adequate quality of work. And so as part of that, we all sign a code of ethics as members of the Alaska Solar Energy Industry Association. And I'm happy to send that to Tim or share that with you, or can send it to anybody by request. It has several items about just, representation of how we do estimates, regards to how we estimate energy production, how we demonstrate finances, and a lot of consumer protections for you as consumers. That's really, really important for us to grow the industry in an ethical and, consumer forward way. So along those lines, I'm going to talk a little bit about the solar resource in Alaska and what has become. Thank you, Mark. I just saw a note in the chat from Mark Holler, also AKC, a member, about joining. So yeah, membership to Alaska Solar Energy Industry Association is open and available to anyone. So thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. So Tim has a slide up here about the solar energy access in Alaska, being very similar to Germany, all the way from southern to northern Germany. Germany has been one of the leaders in clean energy development for, about the past 20 years. They were the largest solar energy user, by country in the world until just a few years ago, where since the United States and China have overtaken them, in addition to some other countries as development increased. This increase in adoption has largely been driven by reduction in cost, which is great. So solar components have continued to come down in cost, just as all technologies come down in cost over time, which is ultimately great for consumers. In addition to that, we hope to have, and like to see good policy environments for solar to take effect as well. That's largely driven by states. And so, something we have been focused on as an industry organization is working on those policies. One of them is net metering. So what that means is that the utility, in this case, Homer Electric, takes the energy that you produce at your house, anything above and beyond what you don't use there directly, and you actually supplying it to the utility, and they distribute it elsewhere, and you get compensated for that, which is it's a great benefit. That's the only really incentive we have as Alaskans, other than the federal income tax credit, which is 26%. And so Tim has a slide up here kind of about the number of net metering installations in the different utilities in South Central Alaska. Well, Golden Valley is included as well. But you can see that the curve is pretty exponential no matter which utility you're looking at, you know, whether it's an Anchorage, the Peninsula, or Matsu. You know, the nice thing about Homer Electric is that they've kind of been on the vanguard of leading the amount of net solar production, net metering that they'll allow on their grid, which is awesome. Traditionally, it's just been 1.5% of the total load on that grid. So the amount of electricity that's being drawn at basically at one time. Homer Electric increased that to 3% last year, and then they quickly surpassed that as well, as you can see the exponential curve of the graph. And now it's 10%, which is great. So, you know, we've seen about a 400% increase through, you know, consumer demand, which has driven that a lot, but also our work on the policy front to make sure that, you know, consumers can have access to low cost energy. Pretty much all forms of solar energy production produce power on your home at less than you pay for the utility. That's how you that's how your system pays for itself over time, is you're producing power less than what you're buying it from the utility for. That's all measured by HEA with something called a bi-directional meter. So they replace your meter at no cost to the consumer or ratepayer. Terms are interchangeable when you're talking about HEA. And that bi-directional meter reads when you're using power traditionally, like we would any other time, but also when you're sending power back to them. It's a seamless interaction between the solar in your house and how that goes out to the utility, and that you're thus compensated for that on your bill. And so, you know, all these curves really demonstrate, you know, kind of, you can see really 2017 things started to really take off. You know, 2016, 2017 is really when, you know, the technology became cost effective to the point that where we could deploy it here just as competitively as you can anywhere else. You know, that being said, we have a long way to go on the policy front up here. So, you know, we as an industry are happy that we can make solar consumer friendly and cost effective without a lot of local or state incentives yet. And so we have a lot of great work to do in that regard. And that is only made possible by, you know, interested ratepayers like you here today. So we really appreciate your time. I'm going to reserve, you know, a lot of time for questions and follow up. That's just a little bit about us, what we're doing as an industry, how we interact as individual companies. You know, we want to elevate the status of the industry for everyone so that we can see a successful market take place.
Wonderful.
And so
Wonderful.
Thank you all for your attention and time. I really appreciate it. And I think we'll do questions whenever I see a lot of chat activity, which is awesome. And we'll do questions whenever, whenever Tim deems that appropriate in the presentation. But thanks so much.
Yep, appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Trimble. Thank you. What we'd like to do now is invite Tyler Cheatwood from Homer Electric Association to go in a little bit more detail about what is a grid-tied home solar and net metering. Mr. Cheatwood?
Yeah, so the image that you have up in front of you is a real nice, simple layout. And that's the benefit of net metering, is it really simplifies the addition of renewable energy into your electric usage. So whether your goal is to reduce your electric usage or just to contribute towards reduced fossil fuel burning, having a net metering option really simplifies that. Without net metering, you really need a way to store the power that you're generating so that you can use it later on when you have a need. That requires batteries and additional inverters, a lot more expense and a lot more time. By using net metering, rather than installing batteries, you can push any excess power you have back to the utility, to Homer Electric, when you're producing more than you need. And at the end of the month, anything you've pushed back, they'll subtract from anything you used. So just one key note, because this is probably 75% of the questions that come back after someone has installed a net metering system. The reads that come back on your electric bill don't show you your total generation. They only show the excess that you pushed back to Homer Electric. So because it feeds into your house first, you'll be using your own power first. So if you're generating 200 kilowatts and using 100 kilowatts at one point, or not kilowatts, hopefully you're not using that much power. That's a lot. If you're generating 20 watts, now my brain's going backwards. We'll go for monthly. If you've generated 200 kilowatt hours for the month and you've used 100 kilowatt hours of that in your house, you'll see two things on your bill. You'll see a 100 kilowatt hour credit for the 100 you pushed back, and you'll notice that your usage from the utility is 100 kilowatt hours less than it would be on average. Because you were generating some of your own power, you pulled less through the meter from Homer Electric. So it's nice. It kind of uses the electric grid as a battery to store that power on the billing side of things. So you still get that full credit for everything you're producing month to month. Just really simplifies the cost of installation to keep the systems as simple as possible. Even now with the micro inverters that install right on the back of the panels, there's minimal wiring and installation work needed inside the house. It can be connected either to the distribution panel inside the house or into the main meter base if there's an available breaker there. I said I'm happy to talk on this. I don't know if anyone had specific questions. Oh, I did see one question in the chat, which was with HCA having moved the capacity that we can allow to connect up, how close are we to hitting that capacity? Through the end of January, there was about 2,200 kilowatts connected. Our 7% of the last year's average retail demand puts the cap at 3,540. So we've got another 1,300 or so kilowatts still available to be installed before we hit that cap. And as was also mentioned, HCA had asked for a higher cap, but the RCA wanted to see some power studies done prior to making such a significant jump. So we are going to work on getting a power study so that we can come up with a more definitive number that we probably won't be able to move past, but then we'll know how much we can install on our system.
Sorry, I was muted there. All right, thank you, Tyler. That was great. I appreciate that. And it's good to know that we got a lot more room to go to add solar to the system. Thank you, thank you. All right, so what is Solarize? Solarize is a collective buying model for home and business solar installations. It was first used in Oregon in 2009. It was quite successful. And now Solarize, they cut their costs dramatically back then because it was just starting out, and the bulk purchases were not very common back then. But Solarize the Kenai is now in its second year, where in 2020, our campaign cut system costs from $3 per watt as low as $2.70 per watt, about a 10% savings. And right now, again, we're running our second year's. Solarize Anchorage is running its fourth year of campaigning, and Solarize Fairbanks is in its third year. So it's a very mature process that has proven successful over the time. And one of the key aspects of Solarize is that it's a volunteered effort. It is run by people that want solar, are interested in solar, and are not directly tied to the solar industry or solar installers. So the question is why Solarize? Why use Solarize? And the pricing of equipment, as mentioned earlier, is fallen rapidly as technological improvements allow. But because the solar industry is still a budding local industry, the soft cost of labor, supply, marketing, and logistics still remain relatively high. So what we try to do is we buy in bulk in regional areas so that we can reduce those soft costs, so that we can provide the solar installers a group of interested people within specific zip codes and or regional areas and help them reduce their overhead and logistical cost of getting their people out. Some of the savings that are involved in Solarize, as mentioned again before, is the federal investment tax credit. January 26th of last year, Congress passed an extension of the bill. The 26% of tax credit, direct tax credit, has been extended for 2 more years. And with it 2023 going down to the 10% margin again, confirming with both tax people and the policymakers, the tax credit goes for not only new purchases or new solar installs, but also additions to your existing solar installation. So if you bought solar panels and you want more, you can buy more panels, and all the cost of those new panels is directly applied to the tax investment credit. Or if you want to, as they spoke of, add battery packs or AC power walls, those also fall under the 26% tax incentive. A little bit of information and background again from the Alaska Center for Energy and Power. With the success of the Solarize programs, it's proven, and this is kind of amazing and new for Alaska, is that we're actually getting solar installation prices cheaper than many people down in the lower 48. I think it's a credit to both the Solarize program and to the solar industry as it matures here in Alaska. This is a bit of an excerpt from a study done by the Michigan Technologies University studying solar installations, and in particular tied to heat pump systems, but also solar as a standalone, both in Canada and in the United States. And what they suggest is that investing in solar, which is a long-term investment, it offers a higher internal rate of return than savings accounts, CDs, and other investment properties. But again, residential photovoltaic and solar powered heat pumps are considered a 25-year investment, financial security, and environmental sustainability. Brings us up to the great question, how to solarize. The Solarize program, as you've seen, is we ask people to sign up and register their interest in installing solar. We ask them if they have an estimate of how much they want. Many people don't know that, and we'll cover that aspect of it sooner, a little bit later on in the presentation. They reach out to their neighbors, everybody they know. We try and get as many people as we can signed up, so that as the more people that we have signed up, the better potential for a higher likely discount. At that time, the team's Solarize group forms RFP teams, and we present a request for proposal to the solar installers throughout our areas, and we invite them to bid for the pool of interested customers. And again, we split it up into specific areas. Excuse me. Because having a known customer pool lowers the logistic and marketing costs, letting the installers offer their services for less, and competition between them incentivizes further discounts. Again, part of the solar team and the Solarize RFP team is a selection team from among the interested people that reviews the proposals that the installer send back. And we choose the installer who offers the best fit of price, availability, and quality. It's not always the lowest price that wins. There's a lot of factors to take into consideration. And again, we can go into that much greater detail, and we encourage you to look into volunteering for the RFP teams just to get a better grip on how this is handled. Once the selection team has chosen a specific vendor for their area, the vendor does additional outreach within the area to gather more customers, and then the installer visits the home, gives estimates, and signs discounted contracts with participant individuals, and then, of course, gets to work putting up the solar panels. So we want to talk about a little bit of how to solarize in Seward, because Seward is our new person on the block. The process is in place. They have 3 net metering installs, and again, the process is in place. The process needs streamlined. We've been following Seward, the new utility director that's there, in his February 8th city council meeting. He spoke of Solarize and the growing interest in putting on solar or solarizing and net metering in Seward. And there's tremendous community support. And at this point, for the people in the East and the rest of the Solarize groups, we can help them by providing community support requiring patience and enthusiasm to get it through. So again, the process is in place, but the process needs streamlined. I do have a small picture of a sample Seward bill. We're still learning about their process, but and we'll cover what's called a customer charge later on in our presentation. Right now, what I'd like to do is call on Yvonne out of Homer, who installed solar herself, to explain a little bit on how individuals can calculate or approximate how much solar they can actually will need, and the value that they'll get out of it. Yvonne?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. So if you're interested in getting solar, how do you start? Where do you start? So a good place to start is look at your electricity bills. And the number you want to look at is the kilowatt hours, not the dollar amount. If you look, I think it's in the lower left of your HEA bill, you see this little diagram that shows you what was billed over the last 13 months, and it will show you how many kilowatt hours each month. However, you may also just look at each individual bill and look how many kilowatt hours you used. And then you might want to consider, are you planning any changes in your home? Are you planning to maybe get an electric vehicle in the future? Are you planning to get new appliances or such as an air source heat pump, which runs on electricity? So if any of those changes are planned, you may want to consider sizing your system a little bit bigger because you're going to be using more kilowatt hours than you used to. Another interesting and important point is the location of your property. Where is a good place to put those panels? Ideally, you want your panels facing south. And you will have to look at your roof. Is your roof positioned in a favorable location? Is it pointing south? If not, you may want to consider a pole mount, where you mount your panels on a railing or a pole, and you can optimize the orientation that way. In Alaska, we do have to consider the seasonal changes. In the summer, you will get a lot more produced from your system than in the winter. So an additional thing you have to consider is that in the winter, depending where you live, your panels will be covered with snow unless they are positioned at almost a 90-degree angle where the snow will just slide off. And when the panels are covered with snow, they don't produce anything. So next slide, please. So once you look at your electricity bill and you kind of know how much you've been using, you can do a simulation. And there is a handy dandy website provided by the National Renewable Energy Lab. And you can see the link there on the slide. It's also on the Solarize website. You get started with, you just punch your zip code up there in that white bar on the upper left, and you hit go. And then you come to a page where you enter your data. So here I entered, it's an example. So the system size, I put 3.5 kilowatt system, which is 12 panels, which is, I think it's a good average residential size on the Kenai Peninsula. You can put in the array type. I selected a fixed roof mount, which is common. The tilt in degrees is the slant of your roof. 23 degrees is relatively shallow. It's not ideal, but I put that in because it's the slant of my roof. The azimuth in degrees is your orientation on the magnetic compass. So 180 degrees is a south orientation, which is the ideal direction to point your panels. Also, under the retail electricity rate, you would enter how much you pay for electricity in your area in dollars per kilowatt hour. And HEA is approximately 23 cents a kilowatt hour. Next slide. And then you click go again, and it brings you up the results on what that system would produce. We're at 3,282 kilowatt hours per year. You can see in the middle column where it says AC energy, how that varies every month, obviously because of the seasonal differences. In the right-hand column, it will show you theoretically what the dollar value of that electricity is at 23 cents per kilowatt hour. However, again, this simulation does not take snow coverage into account. And so in November through February, unless you shovel your panels, you may not get anything. So if your roof has not a steep slant, and you don't feel like shoveling your panels every time it snows, I would consider a pole mount where you can ideally orient and adjust the tilt. So with this tool, you can go back to where you enter the data and you can start playing with it. You put different scenarios in, different orientation, a different mount, a different tilt of your roof, a different system size. And you could do this ad nauseum and have a lot of fun with it, but it gives you a good idea on what a system would produce. And the installer, when they do a site visit, they will actually also do a simulation for you that is very similar to this one. This is a place to get started, to get a good idea before the installer comes to your house. You already kind of have an idea on what you'd be looking at. Okay, next slide. So I wanted to talk about the HEA bill from a customer perspective. And if Tyler and others have some input here, it's certainly welcome. But HEA has minimum charges. So number one, you will see the arrow. There is what's called a system delivery charge. And that, as far as I understand, is pretty much it helps HEA pay for the maintenance of the grid. And what that is that's a minimum charge of 150 kilowatt hours. It doesn't matter how much your system does produce, they will still charge you for that. If you look up near the upper right, it says net usage is less than 150 kilowatt hours. So the number 171 kilowatt hours is what was used in that household in that month off the grid, so to speak. Now, then the consumer generation, the number just below the 171, is the number of kilowatt hours that the solar system did produce and send back into the grid. So your net usage comes to less than 150 kilowatt hours. So you are going to get billed for a minimum of 150 kilowatt hours. Second is a customer charge of $20 on every bill. And what I understand is that that is an administrative fee. And of course, additionally, you will see taxes on your bill. And if you're within city limits, you'll have city tax. And then there's the borough tax. Now a word about the excess consumer generation, which it is highlighted down there, pretty much the last line, correct. So the system, what was in excess is net metered, meaning HEA pays you for it. So currently, I think it's about 8 cents a kilowatt hour. It's obviously less than the retail rate. It's essentially the cost of fuel, and solar being your fuel in this case. So generally speaking, you would be looking at a minimum bill, a total of about $43 a month, regardless of how much your system does produce. However, if your system produces a lot of excess, a lot more than you use, then you will get paid more for that, which can in turn then lower your bill through the reimbursement of the 8 cents per kilowatt hours. But just so that folks are aware, it sounds really good that you're gonna save money on your electricity bill and HEA pays you for your excess generation. However, there are still some minimum charges. And I think that was all the slides I had.
I appreciate that, Yvonne. Thank you so much. That was great. Appreciate it. Thank you. What we'd like to do now is get into a little bit more of some actual estimates, and we're going to call on Matt Haller of Midnight Sun Solar to give us kind of a run through of an average residential area system here in the Kenai. Mark?
All right. Can folks hear me? Thumbs up. All right. Yeah, just want to go ahead and say, first of all, it's Mark Haller, not Matt. But we do want to say a huge thanks to all these volunteers that are doing such wonderful things for solar on the peninsula. Without you guys, you know, it takes a lot to put into it. So I'm sure all of us really appreciate everyone's help collectively to get good information out to folks. And that's a really good part about being a member of the Alaska Solar Energy Industry Association, is that collectively we all can contribute to you know, ethical standards and good things for solar energy. And so we really want to focus on that educational piece and that community outreach. So huge thank you. So system costs, I think one thing to be noted is that the system costs on solar panels have just reduced dramatically over the last 10 years. Furthermore, just in the last 5 years, they've come down, you know, in upwards of 50%. So we're seeing a huge tick in the adoption of the technology, and that's, you know, speaks to some of those net metering curves that we saw earlier, how steep they are, is that these systems are becoming easier and more affordable for folks to install. So like Yvonne said earlier, we always size systems based on the consumption in the home. And if a homeowner does that amount of diligence on their own, that really helps installers out, because you guys will know about what you're in the ballpark for. However, we really want to curtail a proposal to a customer based off of their electric usage, because not only is it a huge benefit to the environment to add solar panels to your house, but we're also looking at the economics of it, and we really want it to be optimized for your usage. Of course, you do always want to keep in mind, if you are going to grow your usage in the future, being that we have access to really good tax benefits now, sometimes it makes sense to maybe slightly overbuild a system in the short term to capitalize on those benefits. But if your initial cost for 3.5 kilowatt systems about just under $10,000 at $2.80 a watt, that's about where we installed for last year's Solarize campaign in the Soldotna and the North Kenai area. You're going to receive your 26% tax credit, and so your net system cost is going to be around $7,300. And just in that first year, you're going to be able to offset roughly $705 in your usage. And one thing to be noted is that those dynamics are always going to change based on the orientation of the solar array. So we do a lot of orientations that are east and west and south and different tilts, etc. And of course, we always model those in our proposals that are given to customers so that they're very, very accurate. But those year one savings are going to kind of fluctuate as a result. And then, a payoff of 10.5 years, give or take. We've seen it as low as 7. We've seen it as high as 13. Again, it's going to come down to the orientation of the solar array largely is what impacts those economics. But that's a very legitimate payoff, I would say. For a system that's warranted for 25 years, for less than half of its warranted life, you're going to be positive on your cash. So folks can save $10,200 on average over the next 14.5 years of their warranted life of their panels. And then we deal with it a lot, especially down here on the peninsula. We go through and do service calls on solar panels that are well over 50 years old. And believe it or not, they still work really, really well. They don't make as much power as they used to when they came out of the factory. But since they're solid state, there's no moving parts, we find that systems will typically last 50, 60 years, and there's just some small pieces in between that you need to fix. But the solar panels themselves are very, very robust and long lasting. And so over that lifetime, you can sequester 138,000 pounds of carbon and offset that carbon footprint, under 789 units of sulfur dioxide and 500 of nitrogen dioxide. So you're taking a car off the road for 12 years. And I think probably for us, one of the biggest feel-good moments is that this is something that's really easy to do for people in their backyard on their own home. And so it's tough because the energy landscape, we all want to contribute in really large ways. However, it's nice to know that with a few simple steps in your own home, you can contribute towards a more renewable future. So yeah, thanks for letting me speak to some of the pricing. If there's more questions, I'll hop on them.
I appreciate that, Mr. Holler. Thank you so much. That was great. What we'd like to do now is invite, excuse me, Mr. Ben May of Alaska Solar to give us an example of, whoops, sorry about that, commercial installation. Mr. May?
Better unmute. Hi, folks. There we go. So thank you so much to Tim and Caitlin and Ben last year and Satchel last year as well down in Homer. And so the community efforts on the part of Solarize make it happen. And I love Solarize. It fits with who we are. It gets more solar on more roofs, it makes a big impact. It does community building, and it makes it an efficient, vetted process so that people can trust what's going on. So I think it's been a great addition to Alaska, and it's been great to be a part of it.
Thank you.
So, yeah, a lot of good news so far. Mark gave a great example from residential. I wanted to speak to what can happen in the commercial level. In your areas outside of Anchorage, there are more incentives than you might imagine. And so I want to run through an example that shows this. This is the Grog Shop liquor store down in Homer. A lot of refrigerators, a lot of freezers. They need a lot of power. So this was a financial decision that was going to make their business more profitable. So they asked us to do the full limit of what is allowed on the grid, which is 25 kW, which comes to, in our case, 79 panels at 315 watts each. And the initial cost was 69,000 and some. So that's kind of a wallop there. Looks like a lot, but then you start chipping away with the 26% tax credit at 18,000. Commercial depreciation, this is just like a deduction on your taxes like other costs. There's a bonus for solar. You can get through that pretty quickly, sometimes in 1 year. Some people choose 5 or 6 years. It can be a little complicated. You work with your tax guy. In the case for Melvin, it was 17,800 was the estimate of what he would get for his depreciation of the solar over time. And then anybody outside of Anchorage, again, is eligible if they have a commercial business and if they check their eligibility first for a USDA REAP grant. So if you have a commercial building outside of, or a commercial entity outside of Anchorage, this is something to check on. And this ended up being about $17,000 worth. So the final cost for him for all this solar was only $15,800. And with a first year savings of 4,300, and with the usual utility escalation rate at 3.5 years, he's going to be paid back. Other kind of good ways to look at it, I really like to look at the internal rate of return. This is like, if I did a business investment or a stock market investment, how would the solar compare to that? So the internal rate of return, accounting for inflation and other factors, was 22%. That's really good. And his cost of his electricity was at around 4 to 5 cents, whereas the current rate for HEA is 23 to 24 cents a kilowatt hour. So this is going to give him a lifetime savings over 25 years of $188,000. And I just calculated the carbon offset for this, more than 750,000 pounds of carbon dioxide. This will be offset by the system. One thing I want to mention on this is his roof is very flat and it faces west. So west will give you about 81% of what a perfect straight south will give you. So don't despair if your roofs face east and west, and if that's your best aspect to get away from shade. The return on investment could still be good, and you don't have to have perfect. You just have to have a proposal that you can accept that's good for you. And so we all give accurate proposals. We use great modeling software that includes shade and tilt and azimuth. And so you will get a very accurate proposal, and then you just have to decide if that's acceptable to you. So killing yourself for perfect is not the point with solar. It's about getting enough solar to cover your usage. Maybe some people want to do more so that they do a big carbon offset. All of us can match a goal of our customers so that you end up putting your money where you want it to go and getting what you want. And again, proposal is very accurate, and you can do pretty well with a lot of aspects, except for north in Alaska, not so good. But yeah, that's it in a nutshell. Commercial entities, I think, have a hell of a potential for saving with solar, and we want to get that word out. And the tax credit, the commercial depreciation, and the USDA grant, if you're eligible for it, can really knock it down. So to a cost that's super economical, better than most places. So, all right. I'll keep it quick and look forward to chatting with you all at the end. So.
Wow, thank you, Mr. May. That was very impressive, and 3.5-year payback. That's quite a feat for a commercial and the system size that size. Wow.
It is. Yeah.
We're in awe. What I'd like to do now is a little bit. I'm just going to briefly cover financing of the solar. This is all very personal, and every individual is going to be completely separate. But one of the things that we'd like to highlight is Homer Electric Association's line of credit program. Homer Electric not only being responsive to the amount of solar panels being installed, but also upon facilitating the addition of more solar to their system. And in the past, their line of credit program was capped out at a $5,000 price tag. So looking at the industry stats, they based their new limit of $10,000 on the average home, as Mr. Holler had pointed out, of about 3.64 kilowatts, or about $10,000. So the payment period can be 6 to 36 months, and there's other fees, of course, involved in there, but that's one of the easiest and fastest ways here for Homer Electric customers to get solar financing, and it comes right on your electric bill. Or I should say most vendors, I can't speak for the association, but almost all solar installers have partnered lenders that they use and normally have pretty good rates. And that's an option for you to look at. And then also local banks, where either through home equity, second trust, etc. I'm going to say this because Mr. May covered it so well, about the Rural Energy for American Program, Renewable Energy Systems and Energy Efficient Improvement Guaranteed Loans and Grants, AKA REAP. And for the commercial people and or agricultural entities, this is something that I know quite a few people did it last year, and we've heard of a few successes. We haven't gotten everybody's story back yet, but this has been a proven method of financing and really reducing your cost to Solarize as a business and or agricultural entity. So brings up, who will Solarize? We're just going to leave it at everyone. But there's so many ways to participate, and that helps out the Solarize thing. Number one, of course, is putting solar on your home. Second one is talk to your neighbors. The more people involved, the greater the likely discount that everybody can get. And then, of course, being on the RFP writing and selection teams, helping filling out the RFP and choosing the installer. Okay, when to Solarize? Let's go a little bit about our scheduling that we're looking at on the Solarize campaign this year. We have a deadline for interested parties to register online. This is the list of names that we will include in the RFP to the installer, so that the more names that we have registered, again, the greater discount potential that we may have. We're closing that up on the registration up on March 8th. Between now and March 8th, we will be establishing the RFP teams, creating the RFP documents. So basically all we need to do is fill in the number of interested peoples and the zip codes that they live in and send those out. We'll send them out to the vendors. We're requesting that the proposals come back by March 15th. And that will give us 5 days, or the RFP team, excuse me, to 5 days to review the proposals, interview the vendors, and then to choose the vendor. And so we're trying to time this to equal out to the solar equinox and kind of keeping with the solar theme here. And then it also gives the installers, hopefully we'll have a a little bit less snow this spring than we have right now, but it gives the solar installers a longer season for installation. And the solar campaign does have an end date. We normally end it either at the end of September or around the end of September. And so the actual solar season, I guess you might say, is from March, the spring equinox in March to the fall equinox in September. And then at the end of the Solarize season, we look back on what we did. We learn from the lessons that, or the mistakes we've made. We learn lessons, and we start all over for 2022. So what I'd like to do now is kind of introduce Caitlin. She's a little bit more knowledgeable on this than I am, and basically a little bit about how to talk to your neighbors. Caitlin?
Thanks, Tim. It sounds simple. My expertise is not Solarize or panels. But I do know a lot about behavior change and psychology. And I do think that, like Ben May said, one of the biggest reasons that this is successful is that this is the best way to make change. I'm doing this. Have you thought about it? So I think last year, my dad, Bruce Vodla, got very excited about this, and he is a very quiet guy. He's a general contractor in Soldotna, and he doesn't go out and talk to his neighbors, but he did last year, and multiple folks in his neighborhood solarized because he went out and talked to them. He texted friends in the area, and I think that's really what we need to do to make this successful. So even if right now you grab your phone and you text, a couple folks in your neighborhood or family members who live in the area or friends, and just say, hey, have you ever thought about solarizing? I'm thinking about doing it. It can be planting a seed that kind of ripples out like wildfire, which is what happened last year. We had 82 folks decide to put solar on their home or business. And I did it here in Clam Gulch. I've got 10 panels on my roof, and it's a very old cedar shake roof, but it works like a charm. And I'm very, very pleased with the process and with the result. So don't hesitate to send folks to the solarizethekenai.org website. So just even if all you do is text people this link, just say, hey, go to this link. If you are 100% interested in putting solar on your roof this year, or you are 2% interested in putting solar on your roof this year, sign up here that you're interested, because basically what that does is it allows us to provide a list of potential customers to potential installers, and then that, the more customers that they have in that pool, the better proposal that they can write for the community. So that's my spiel. If you've got any questions or thoughts, you can always reach out to any of the volunteers who are trying to spread the word on this, and we really need just talk to people. That's how this is successful. So without further ado, I think I'm going to jump into questions. We're at 7 o'clock, and I want to get to as many questions as we can. The chat has been insanely active. There's a lot of folks jumping in with answers. I'm very grateful to Dave Thomas and to Aaron McKittrick /Hig, who are both HEA board members, and we've got Jen Pletz is fielding questions from Seward. So maybe Ben Betker, you've been paying attention to what's been going on in the chat. Is there anything that has risen to the top that's been asked a lot? I was thinking maybe you could start us off with a question and an answer from the chat, and then we can go to any questions that are happening in the room.
Well, someone in the chat has asked for specifics about how to register your interest in Solarize, how to get on the list of people who are going to be included in the RFP. And there's a form at this website we've all been talking about, solarizethekenai.org. It's under the heading subscribe. So if you enter your information in that form, those are going to be the people that we count up for our RFP. to let installers know how many people are interested. So the more people we have, the greater the potential customer pool, and the more incentive there is for installers to compete for the business.
Yes. Yeah, and there are some questions on there like, how many panels do you think you're going to install? And if you don't know, just leave it blank. The important thing is like, I'm at least 1 or 2% interested. So go and sign up, and that will help everybody get a better price in the end. And of course, fill out as much info as you can on that sign up, but it's not required. I'm going through, if you have a question, raise your hand either physically and I'll call on you, or via Zoom, or *6 if you're on the phone.
I see a Shivan Miller.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I was wondering, my husband and I had a system when we lived out of town that was off grid. And I hear a lot about solar, but what about combination of solar and wind? Do you offer any, are there any vendors that offer both? So you have a supplement. When the sun is low, we always found wind to be very helpful in the wintertime. And I know they have the vertical wind generators that are good in town. They don't need to be as high. Have you any information on that, or?
I'd like to answer that if I may. Within the Solarize environment, you know, we try and focus on the solar aspect of it at all. But yes, there's, you know, the capabilities of wind are out there, but within the Solarize campaign, and because we're working specifically with solar installers, we do not include wind at this time.
Right.
I did wind, this has been May, Alaska. So I did wind for 6 years out in the bush, and dove deep into it. Residential wind can work, and I want to compliment you on making it work. If you are handy and a tinkerer and want to fix a wind turbine, you can make it work. But that's pretty much the reason that we don't do it, is because it's so much more maintenance and so much less plug and play than solar. Yeah, it's got its place, but I think it's really they break. There's a lot of moving parts. So that's I think Tyler Cheatwood can attest to how many wind is counted as a capacity in HEA, but it's not running. So,
and I'll chime in with what everyone else previously said. When you're remote, when you're off the grid, any bit of generation, wind, solar, is fabulous. You don't need to run the generator so much, use expensive fuel. If you're off the grid, yeah, wind can pencil out. If you're on the grid, everyone loves to complain about their HEA bill, but it's a whole lot cheaper than running your own generator. And it's an odd spot that gets fabulous wind just 80 feet off the ground. Those turbines on Fire Island, they're 300 feet off the ground. We've all flown into Anchorage. We know how windy that spot is consistently. You almost certainly at your home do not have 30% capacity factor of wind.
Okay.
It is very unlikely that a residence on the grid will pencil out for wind. Solar almost always comes in sooner. But when you're off the grid, yeah, like, you know, anything, it helps fill that need. On the grid, HEA is willing to be your battery, Seward's willing to be your battery. Solar panels are usually the far better rate of return.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas.
Does anyone else have a question? I'm not seeing many hands raised, but feel free to add a question to the chat or to raise your hand.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I got a couple questions. First of all, can you mount these panels just on the side of your house? You're talking about a pole and a roof, but can they just go on the side of your house against your siding?
This is Ben May with Alaska Solar. Yeah, you could do a wall mount. We found that they take a lot more labor than on the roof. And if you mount them on the wall, they're optimized for the sun to come in the winter and not so optimized for high summer sun. And they tend to be shaded more by trees because they're lower, and they tend to be shaded by eaves. So it's pretty hard to get very many panels on a wall. So the return on investment is almost always lower than putting them on your roof. The changing tilt requires engineering, requires racking, more labor. We've run the analysis hundreds of times, all of us, and that's why you see a lot of solar flat to the roof, and it's optimized for summer, and you make your best bang for your buck with your spring, summer, and fall production.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask another question?
Go ahead.
So the installers, do they go A to Z? In other words, they install on your roof, they add all of your electrical. I assume they're cutting into your electrical panel. And then to follow up on that, how much generally are you disrupting your house, cutting into sheetrock, running interior stuff? And how much space do I need for this inverter and all the indoor equipment? How much of my garage is taken up a wall? Is it a 10 by 10 section on my wall, or how on that?
Mark Holler, you want to field that one?
Yeah, I've been talking a lot. Mark, you should answer that.
Is he there, or is he
I
muted?
will happily grab that one. Sorry, I was trying to find that mute button. So it depends which type of technology you're going to use. There's string inverters and microinverters, but I believe most installers these days are on the tune of microinverters. So a lot of the equipment's actually up on the roof, which keeps it really clean underneath the panels. So you'll see the solar array, and then the tie-in is very application specific, also specific to customer aesthetic needs. So a lot of times we run conduit on the exterior and retrofit either over to the service or into the load center. And there's options for where exactly you tie in. And then we've done a lot of arrays too, where we're actually going into the attic and making the appropriate channeling between the array and the interior wall, or wherever the final destination for the tie-in is going to be. Typically for the Solarize campaigns, I think most of the installers prefer to have it kind of relatively straightforward in terms of what that tie-in is going to look like. And then usually if there's something that's kind of outside of what the norm would be, you would talk to that installer specifically about if there were any additional costs associated with it or not. As far as the footprint on the wall of what it takes, there's a requirement by Homer Electric to install a lockable, visible, open disconnect somewhere that's accessible to them. And that's something that gets called out on a diagram. And we kind of call it the feel-good switch, where the utility has an assurance that the array's been de-energized, and a personnel can lock that. And that switch is usually pretty small, nothing more than about 12 or so by 8 inches. And then depending on the specific equipment, there might be 1 or 2 other relatively small enclosures very near to that. And that's about it. So generally the impression I get from most folks is that it takes up a lot less space on the wall than they would anticipate normally.
Okay, thank you. And that $10,000 initial cost for 12 panels included A to Z. That's complete install and operational. There's no other costs after that.
So yes, sorry, I left that one out. Usually in the terms of the request for proposal, it's going to spell out that the installers need to provide quotations based on a turnkey installation that is ready to be what we call like permission to operate from the utility. So it's intended to be turnkey.
Thank you.
All the Solarize campaigns that I've been involved with, it's beginning to end.
Okay.
So,
Nice.
so I'm not just the,
Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
I'm not just the hair club president, I'm a client. No. I mean, I'm not just HA vice president. I had a system put on my roof last summer. And Alaska Solar did it. And I didn't.
Whoops, you're muted.
Sorry, Dave, I accidentally muted you.
Oh, okay, sorry. So my wife wanted to go as close to net zero as she could get. We got a roof full of panels last summer, and I'm HA director, vice president, pretty sophisticated engineer, I think. I didn't do diddly. I just, Alaska Solar said, here's the estimate. I read every word of the contract. They said, send $1,000 check. I did. They said, sign this thing, send it back to us. I did, but I did nothing with HEA. I coordinated no schedule on any of the electrical side. They never went inside the house. They wore their masks. It was completely turnkey, and they finished installing it. HA inspector showed up 4 hours later, turn it on, boom, boom, boom. I think I'm pretty technically sophisticated, and I needed none of that to make it happen. I was very pleased that it was as turnkey as I could have imagined.
Tyler Cheatwood, you're always going to show up 4 hours after we finish, right?
Yeah, that's
I've noticed big differences in the two vendors.
Yeah.
Just as a director, people call to complain, and some tell you what it is, and some have overpromised. And I think your industry could be better about that. And obviously, I'm not afraid to call people out on overpromising and underdelivering. But I had a good experience.
Thank you.
If I can chime in, that is something that changed this year as things got busy. It used to be that there was 1 or 2 new systems a month. And so when someone said, hey, this system's online and ready for inspection, I would go out there the next day and get the inspection done. And occasionally I'd say, hey, I've got enough time, or I'm already in the area. I'll be there in an hour or 2. That's not the case anymore. Now, I mean, I was getting notifications of 15 in 1 week that were ready for inspection. And it was pulling me away from all of my other job responsibilities. So we ended up consolidating. So on Wednesdays, we would do any inspections ready in Homer or on the south end of the system. On Fridays, we were doing any inspections on the north end of the system. We're trying to streamline that even more. As the electricians know, when we go out there, I'm looking for basically a match between the design drawings, the one-line drawings, the equipment on the application, and what's installed in the field. So the pictures I'm taking for documentation are pretty basic. And with the same installers doing the same types of setups, we're looking at a way to make it possible for the application and inspection photos to be submitted on the HEA website by the installers to speed up the inspection process, and basically allowing the electricians to take those pictures, submit them, and have that count as the inspection. That's in the works right now. I've got a draft that's being reviewed. As soon as it's available, it'll go on the HEA website in the same area that you can download the interconnection application. So there will be a spot. The other thing is, any electricians that are using that means to submit their paperwork, we can list their contact information there on the website, and it'll be randomized, so we're not showing any preference towards one installer over another. But again, just trying to make it a little bit faster and make the inspection process faster. The last step is, after it's inspected, now someone has to go out there and change the meter. That can still take several days to 2 weeks, especially during a busy time of year. But hopefully we can speed up the inspection process a little bit this year, shave a little bit more time off of it until the systems can come online.
I want to give a big, Ben May with Alaska Solar. I want to give a big shout out to Tyler Cheatwood and to HEA. They've done a great job of, dealing with an influx of solar and being available and setting up that system last year. That was great. We knew what was coming, and it was good to work with. So appreciate that. And Chugach Electric does pictures. We know what to send them. It's a pretty regular process. We're doing the same thing over and over. Everybody gets comfortable with it. Works great. So a big vote for that.
Yeah, I think everybody's worked really hard to figure out how to get a lot of new solar capacity onto the grid in a short period of time. So kudos to everybody involved. It's been kind of wild. Does anyone else have any questions? Becca, are you applauding or asking a question? And
both. Yeah,
okay.
thank you so much. I hope somebody else didn't ask this question. I had a phone call for a few minutes, but I have sort of a larger property. We have 4 meters and 12 acres and a bunch of different buildings. So just have some general concerns, and maybe just getting somebody out to look at it and give us a quote is the best route. But should we try to like consolidate and not have 4 meters? And like, I'm worried about line loss also. Like, do we need to repower, everything there?
Looks like Dave has an answer.
Yeah, so in general, reducing the number of meters will save you some serious bucks each month. I mean, you could be looking at $100 a month savings if you could consolidate those. HEA and many utilities around the country used to run out and throw meters in all over and have very low fixed costs. And we saw what happened in Texas when people don't charge for capacity and nobody wants to pay for capacity, and our system delivery charge is weird and hard to explain. But for an individual member, in general, reducing the number of meters will save you money. And particularly as you go to some net metering, that system delivery charge, you'd rather only incur 1 of them than 4 of them. So it can be a separate discussion from net metering, but I suspect that instead of 4, you'd be better off with 2 or 1 meter. And that, again, savings could be $50 to $100 a month, every month forever.
So we're a seasonal property. There's 1 meter that's going year round and the other 3 are seasonal. So consolidating, but still being able to have that one person have some solar benefit in the winter, but really the bulk of it is going to be May through September.
And whether, even though you say it's seasonal, HEA is charging you all 12 months of the year on each of those meters.
Yep.
So and you've been increasingly aware of that as we bumping the per meter charge up and decreasing the energy charge. So again, you're probably come out ahead if you could kill 1 or 2 or 3 of those meters. And
how do I do that? I mean, do I just say, oh, we want for y'all to come out and do that, or is that something we need to do on our end?
I've done it at my brother's house. I'm not an electrician, but I play one on TV.
It has to do with
a sophisticated homeowner could do it on their own, but if not, call an electrician, or maybe talk to your solar supplier vendor in the process of getting the bid. But it's too much to explain right now.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ben.
Changing a meter or replacing a meter or consolidating a meter is built into the Solarize. It can be part of your getting solar ready, and so it is definitely eligible for the 26% tax credit. So do it with your solar, get 26% off all the work.
So smart. Thanks, Ben.
Great.
Does anyone else have a general question before we dive into region-specific breakout rooms? I'm gonna see any hands. The way I'm gonna do
Looks like
this.
there's a Bob. Bob has a hand up.
Yeah, go-
For the question earlier, the footprint, I do have a screenshot of my phone that will show up to kind of see what size that might look like. Does that show up?
trying to find
The
it.
meter and then the box. There you go. Pretty small. Where did they go? There we go.
Mm-hmm. What's the question?
There was a question earlier of how much space it takes on a wall.
Oh, yeah,
So I
thank you.
just
Yeah,
was
pretty minimal.
showing what that looked like.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it's pretty small.
Perfect.
Yeah,
All right.
I would say there are 2 new cigar box size things on the side of our house, and I spray painted them to match the siding.
So the breakout rooms, I'll jump in here real quick. The breakout rooms, we're going to divide them into east. So if you're in the Seward area, join the east room. From Sterling, or actually from anywhere from Sterling to Clam Gulch, please join the central room. And in the lower, please join from Nanilchik to Homer, go ahead and join into the lower area. And we'll just flip over to the big thank you slide and invite you to choose your area and join others in your community. And thank you so much for everybody. And I'm going to be in the central room since I live in Kenai and I'm doing solar this year. So I will join you there. I'm going to end now, Caitlin.
Yeah, yep, thank you. I'm going to open all the rooms in a second. I just wanted to say thanks to all of the speakers and thank you to Tim for setting everything up and to all of the volunteers. Thanks to everybody who's helped answer questions in the chat. And we're very, very happy as Cook Inlet Keeper to be a part of this really great community and regional effort to bring more clean energy on board. So without further ado, I'm going to open all the rooms and hopefully we'll have some more specific questions answered in there in a smaller setting. And basically, the rooms are now open and I haven't assigned you. You just pick your own room. If you've got any questions about how to do that, just feel free to ask in the chat or ask out loud.
There it is. Join central. Oop. There we go. Yes.
I'll probably jump into one room because both the central and the lower peninsula will be just me. So I'll chime in and ask if there's any questions for HEA and then jump out to the other room real quick after.
Thank you. You know, and we've got until 8 o'clock on this meeting and it's not going to cut us off. So for those who have the time, please stay as long as you need. And don't forget to go to solarizethekenai.org and encourage others to go there to sign up. And if there's anybody who has specific questions that aren't general questions that aren't region specific, I'm happy to try and help answer some here. I think we've had about 70 folks in this meeting. It's fun to see so many names. Thanks everybody for coming.
Ben, just 2 little things I've pondered numerous times. Have you ever done like a southeast, southwest installation for a house that and then had those combined capacities give both a more output plus over a broader period?
Yeah, definitely that happens when we have only limited roof space on those 2 facets of a roof. A southeast and southwest, they perform pretty similarly. They'll give you, I think, around 91, 92% of optimal. So they're quite good. Anything that from southwest to southeast, I'm cheering for it. It's great. You know, when I roll up for a site visit and that's what's available, like, okay, we're going to do well. So
Okay.
yeah. Hey, can you help me out? I haven't done breakout rooms before. I can't tell where I'm at.
You're in the
I
general room, so if you probably want to, I would imagine
want
that,
to hit the south one, yeah.
yeah. At the bottom of your, if you go to more, you can pick breakout room. I can also drop you in there if you would want me to.
Yeah, I clicked on Lower Peninsula and then it didn't seem to happen. So that's weird.
That is weird. Here, I will do, I think some other folks are having this
Please kick me
similar
out.
problems. And I
Well,
will do.
Dave, if we have more questions, we could Zoom individually
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah,
both of you.
there are a lot of things we could talk about.
Yes.
Yeah, great. That was great.
Great.
Thank you.
I'm gonna drop you now, Ben. But I
Goodbye.
appreciate you both very, very much for joining and offering your expertise.
Okay. Cheers. Thanks.
Mhm. And then Andy, I'm dropping you into the Seward room, Eastern Peninsula. Sorry it took me so long. Charles, let's see, I will add you to Seward. Colin, I'll add you to the Eastern Peninsula. I should have just called it Seward and Moose Pass. Ben, yes. The Central Peninsula, thank you for helping so much. Dave, I'm gonna assign you to the Seward room because I'm just gonna assume Dave Papperman. Charles, let's see, Megs, Jenny, and Janet. Oh, Jan Wells. I'm gonna put you in the Central Peninsula. Let's see. Megs and Jenny, do either of you want to go into a room? I can help you get there if you need. Wait, can I just looking? Let's see here. Megs and Jenny, unmute yourself if you, and let me know if you'd like to go into a breakout room. I can assign you. I'm gonna jump into,
Changed out. So for the most part, yeah, growing is usually pretty easy.
And you have next year's tax credit, so you can put in half to this year and half next year and still get the 26% tax credit.
Or get a loan for it and put it all in.
Any other questions out there? Technical questions? It doesn't look like it. All right. Is there any questions that I can answer on the RFP? We have Ben on board here, and he's our RFP expert. He created the document. Yes, sir. Mr. Cheatwood, go ahead and.
I was actually going to say, because I also need to check on the Lower Peninsula room. Were there any questions specifically for HEA? If not, I'll go ahead and jump to the other room and check on them.
Appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
All right.
Any questions there, Mr. Holler? Appreciate your effort.
economical for a residential.
Okay,
So,
thanks.
yeah.
I see Tyler is in our room now, so if you have any questions for him, now's a good time.
Yeah.
I have a question. So we're over in Halibut Cove, and I know that there's this big push to kind of get out and get quotes, and then we've just had all this HEA Stonehawker Creek drama going on, and just like, is this going to be something that is going to work out for us in Halibut Cove? Will the grid net metering and stuff work the same for us?
The net metering shouldn't be affected. If there is a meter on your house with power from HEA, we can make it an interconnection.
Yeah, and HEA, we are, you're part of the co-op. So unless you decide not to be, we are required to make electricity get to you however we have to do it. Like that's even if the creek runs over the power lines, we'll figure out a way.
Right. Kudos to y'all for continuing to figure it out. We're on standby constantly, flicking the generator on and off, and keeping the salmon frozen and stuff. But yeah, okay. I'm super interested in this program and just wanted to get some of those preliminary questions out of the way before going through the whole application process.
Yeah, so we did a system over with Catchback Bay Wilderness Lodge, and that was great. We knocked back their electrical usage a bunch, and yeah, they had the logistic support to get us over there, and that made it pretty easy. They
Great.
used
Okay.
their boats, and it was,
yeah, we do too.
It was lovely. It was a great time. So.
Nice. Yeah, we're expanding our staff quarters, and just electric heaters and tons of little tiny staff rooms, and we're like, oh my gosh, this is going to be expensive. Otherwise we have to haul diesel, and that's expensive, or we have to haul propane, and that's expensive.
Yeah,
and just trying to have a long vision here.
Actually, when it comes to doing the meter change out and the inspection for meters that are remote, like across the bay, we try and coordinate those even a little more than usual, so that we can get out there and swap the meter at the same time as the inspection. So rather than having to do multiple trips for the inspection and the meter change out, just to do it all at once. But that means a little bit more double checking with the electrician that it's actually at that point it's ready for inspection and meter change out.
Becca, I was just going to ask if you'd signed up on the Solarize website yet.
No, I have not.
And I just say, don't hesitate. There's not really an application process per se. It's just a sign up and an estimate. But really, it's just putting your name down as interested. And then once you're there, it kind of puts you as a customer who's potentially interested in solar. And then whoever is chosen as the installer will reach out to you and work with you from there. And do basically come to your house and give you a quote, and but don't worry about an onerous application process.
So I have
Right.
one question that I probably should know the answer to, but I don't. How is the process different if there's already solar panels and you're just expanding?
Good question. If there's an existing interconnection there, there's already an application, we've already reviewed the equipment installed. As long as the new equipment is matching the existing equipment, it's not a different type of inverter. It's not significantly different if you're just adding additional panels. Then all we would really need is the paperwork submitted showing what the additional capacity being added is, and a picture of the additional panels up on the roof. The pictures we normally take is one of the panels to show where it's located, one of the meter base, and one of the disconnect switch, and the inverters if it's there on the wall. So in that case, it's really just the panels that are changing. The other thing is there is a maximum capacity. So as long as the capacity doesn't go over what the net metering system allows, then it's just submitting that new application with the updated size and a picture of the additional panels.
Yeah, and technically we've done that a couple times, and technically it's been a non-issue. We just charge for the 10 more panels that you want to put up, and we match, usually if it's an end phase, we get end phase and match it up to that, and make it apples to apples.
Does my
Oh, go ahead.
does my solar array, is it capable of producing power if the grid does go down for one reason or another? I know it would be minimal power at most of the, not at night, of course, but do they need grid power to energize the circuits and make it work?
Yeah, the efficiency of going grid tie does have the effect that it needs the grid as the big rock it can push against. The grid supplies frequency and voltage, and our microinverters match that. A standalone grid forming inverter and the whole setup with that involves batteries, and typically costs about 2 to 2.5 times more. We do those, but it's most people end up choosing using the grid as your battery. The give and take back and forth with HEA is much more efficient, much more dependable, unless HEA goes down. And
And
if one wanted to add that capability into a system that's already pushing back to the grid, what would that entail specifically as far as equipment?
Yeah, so
other than batteries.
We are chasing Tesla for the Powerwall very hard because they're very popular, and it's a good product. They are not coming to Alaska yet. So I'm starting a campaign with all our customers, any email address that we have, to ask people to go to Tesla and fill in the 6 lines that I'm interested in the Powerwall. There's no money required, but they need to know that Alaskans are supremely interested in backup power because it really matters. So yeah, Tesla Powerwall. We're also just arranged a meeting, working hopefully to see what Sonnen has. They're a German company. These are all AC coupled batteries, and what that means is it pulls from your distribution circuit breakers and it gives back to those. And when it realizes it's getting overcharged, it will shift the frequency up and turn off the microinverters you already have. So they've figured out how to tweak those microinverters so that they can regulate them, which is an important part of being a grid forming, kind of manage your own little grid thing. So they're wicked smart. They've done that thing, and so that's possible. So yeah, you can get the Powerwalls and the Sonnens in other parts of the world. We want to bring them to Alaska. So.
Thanks.
Tori, did you have a question?
Hey, yeah, I did. We are building a house right now, and we are framed in, and we don't have the roofing material on just yet. And it's the majority of our roof is south facing 12-12 pitch, so kind of optimal solar.
Brutal.
Yeah, the contractors were not very happy, but
you designed it, right?
That is the perfect optimal 45 degrees is the most productive angle.
Cool.
That's the 100% right there. So.
Sweet. I was kind of wondering what I should think about in terms of, we haven't started wiring, but if there's anything we could do to make it easier once, I don't know if we'll be able to make it happen this year or in the next couple years, but right. Just at this stage.
Right. Yeah, go ahead with your roofing. We come behind the roofer completely. We don't need to coordinate with that. That's too difficult and not productive. The wiring, heck yeah, just a couple wires run from your roof, maybe one for a small system, down to where you think the disconnect will be, and then a wire from the disconnect to your meter, typically. And so, yeah, if you want a little bit of reference material, we have that. You can email me or email us at info@aksolarpower.com, and we'll send you a 1-line. You can take that 1-line to your current electrical contractor, and we can give them have a 5-minute conversation with them, and for half hour to an hour of their time, you'll be solar ready and not have to run conduit on the outside of your building. It'll look better and be more efficient. So
Cool. And that
yeah,
disconnect.
so just do the wiring. The short answer is do the wiring when you're doing the rest of your wiring.
Okay. And the disconnect is inside your house, kind of near your panel, or is that outside as well?
It's outside near your meter.
Okay.
Is the best if the meter's going to be on the side of your house. In Homer, that's not always the case. Often on the edge of the property, but there's,
Yeah, and I'll chime in. We like it so that if someone walks up to the meter base, they can see that, oh, there's a disconnect for the solar. If not, we ask that there just be a label saying the disconnect located on such and such building or on another location. And it's also not 100% required to be on the outside of the building. If it needs to be installed inside of a garage or something like that, that switch is not really operated without some communication with the customer.
Oh.
So if it doesn't work out that it can't be installed next to the meter base, we can figure something out.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Bravo.
I do have another question. I get a lot of questions about folks who solarized last year who are now thinking about using solar as the backup. And I know we talked about that just a little bit, but is there, it sounds like it's still like if you spent 10 grand on putting, 10 or 12 solar panels on your roof, it's going to be another 10 grand to use that solar as a backup. Is that still the going rate? Do you see?
At least.
Yeah. Okay.
The Powerwall itself is 6 or 7, and the wiring is fairly extensive. And there's some other gadgets involved. There's 3 boxes they're going to install. And one of them is regulating and monitoring. It's the control center that sees what's going on and does switching back and forth between where the power is. So, yeah, I think 10,000 would be a low estimate right now.
Yeah, is that what you think, Tyler? In terms of like using this like distributed solar for folks using it as a battery for their house, like it's. I know that it's much more cost effective to use the grid as a battery, but for folks who don't have, like, I don't have a diesel generator backup or something here. So as I look forward to my future of having electric vehicle and having these other things, does it make sense for me, I guess, like to think about that, or to just like
Growing up in Homer, I remember when we would have outages and we always had candles ready because you didn't know how long power would be out. But that's not really how outages are anymore. And unless you're in Seldovia, then it may be a little longer, but even then.
In the booming metropolis of Clam Gulch, I
generators
should be fine.
So the system reliability is much better.
Right.
So having a net metering system that just ties in with the grid, it's very, very cost effective.
Yeah.
But if what you're actually after is uninterrupted power, that's very different from a net metering interconnection type thing where you're just trying to reduce your bill. If you're after uninterrupted power because you have sensitive electronics or something else that needs to stay powered 24/7, you're after something else with a higher dollar mark to achieve.
Okay. Yeah, I think a lot of times it's maybe just a philosophical, like knowing that you can weather a storm or something, but if that's not actually needed anymore, and that for homeowners like myself who, we live kind of rural, but we're still tied to the grid, and most power that goes off will probably come back on in like 4 hours. So, okay. Yvonne?
I have a question. I know with lead acid batteries, for example, in an off-grid situation, they cannot tolerate a deep discharge. So you would have to make sure they stay charged up. Like if the sun is not shining, you need a backup generator to recharge your batteries. How do lithium-ion batteries handle? Can they withstand a deeper discharge without reducing the lifespan of the battery or being damaged?
Yes, we use them with the wind turbine on a whole village scale. So it was a 275 kW lithium-ion setup, and they like to run between 30 and 80% charged. They can do much deeper without near the damage that lead acid does. And the key thing about lithium ion is the round trip efficiency. As you take a kilowatt hour and put it into them and then take it back through the inverter, the round trip efficiency is 85 to 90%. Whereas the round trip efficiency for a lead acid is more like 60%. So if you're constantly putting your electricity into a lead acid battery like the old string inverters were, and then pulling it out for your house, so much of your solar went to just that conversion process and the loss in the chemical battery. So.
Thanks, Tyler.
Aaron, I noticed that you had a question about the heat pumps in Solovia. And I think we've done a few of those. They do team up well with solar. They, especially in the spring and fall, and especially near the ocean where you don't get the colder temperatures. So
yeah, I mean, you wouldn't need heat in the summer, so, but yeah, spring and fall, I could see.
Right.
I think we're probably, it's too bad that you can't have the Solarize, if you could pair the installations, that would be awesome too.
Yeah, we're showing up with the same electrical needs, the same electrician doing the same stuff. So we've done that once or twice. We show up with the air to air, like a $700 or $1,000 unit. And the tricky part is you also need somebody that can do the refrigerant. So there's another guy that needs to show up, but the air to air work pretty well down to, they say down to -10 Fahrenheit, but a little better if you keep it above 0. So they
and on the south side of the bay, it's almost always above 0 anyway. We are
right
more maritime, the upper Kenai Peninsula.
Yeah, so they'll work. If you don't have solar, you're paying a lot for that heat. When you do have solar, on a monthly basis, because of the net metering, on a monthly basis, if you have enough solar to support some of it, it compares fairly well to natural gas.
And nobody on this side has natural gas.
Exactly, and so it compares a lot better than Holland diesel, that's for sure. So.
Oh yeah, also a question for a friend. For the tax credits and stuff, does it matter if it's a residence versus somebody's business?
Yeah, so even if you don't want to do the REAP thing, maybe your system is really small and it isn't worth doing the laborious part of the REAP grant, you're still going to get that commercial depreciation if it's for a commercial entity. So you pretty much, depending on your tax bracket and how, the vagaries of your own taxes, you come pretty close to doubling your tax credit if you're a commercial entity. So you can knock up, with the 26%, you do another maybe 20%, maybe up to 45% paid by incentives.
For home businesses, you can only use the 26% residential, correct? You can't. It's a commercial property, not a home business office.
I think it's proportional, but I'd have to check.
Oh yeah, okay. So maybe if like 50,
between you and your tax professional and how aggressive you want to be and all that, those are hard questions.
Yeah.
It's called creative taxing.
The specific question in this case is someone who has it's zoned residential, but the property it's an art studio, so it's used as a business and not lived in. So it is a business property.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it should be 100% then. It should.
Okay.
So that should be good. Yeah, if it's got its own meter and it's got its own property and its own legal description, property boundary, that's pretty clear.
How do you think that volunteers who are interested in getting more solar in their community can reach out to businesses? Because I'm sure as a solar installer, you do advertising to businesses, but I think a lot of businesses, we've got a couple in the Central Peninsula who've done, you did River City Books. Did you also do Readout Realty?
We didn't do readout. We did River City Books. We did a Homer bookstore. We did, Ketchimack Wilderness Bay was a REAP grant.
Yeah.
The Kilchers with the show in their shop, they did it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think maybe businesses just don't know how good of a deal they could get right now.
yeah. And so,
seems like
I think it's going to be for us a combination of digital marketing and also the newspaper and Homer so strong. I think just straight up putting an ad in the paper this year. So and maybe one targeted to residential and then one targeted to commercial, because they're quite. If you try to talk about both in one ad, I think it's going to be muddy. It's going to be confusing. So, but yeah.
Caitlin, go ahead.
Nope, that was it. Thank you.
Okay. Caitlin, how are we doing on time?
7:53. So, I mean, we're good. The meeting won't kick us out, I don't think.
Okay. There's one other thing we kind of wanted to touch on in this breakout room, and that is to see if there are any interested individuals that could help with the request for proposal process. And the actual document that goes to the vendors, there's not much work to be done on that because it was used last year. And so pretty much just dates need to be changed and it just needs to be gone over. So if volunteers will be interested in joining a meeting where we would go over that document, make sure it's all good to go to the vendors. And then the vendors have, I think, 5 days or a week or so to put in their bids. So those
1 week
will come back. Okay. And then the request for proposal team would get back together and look at all the proposals. And I think there's going to be interviews. There's criteria on how to evaluate the proposals and then decide on a vendor for each area. And the 3 different areas are also talking to each other to see, we're coordinating with each other because we don't want to overwhelm one vendor with all 3 areas, generally speaking. So if anybody's in this room right now that would be interested in maybe being on that team, if you could let myself or Caitlin know.
Yvonne, let me just say real quick, as someone who participated in the last go around and had solar installed as a result of this effort, and it was really a result of this effort, I would be happy to talk to anybody if anybody were interested in knowing a homeowner's experience and how it worked. So I'd throw that out there in case anybody's interested, because it was a very, very enlightening experience for me, and both my son and I did it. So we have 2 homes that we really put together as a result of the effort last time. I'd be happy to talk about it to anybody.
Yeah, that's good to know. I also know that KBBI, they were supposed to reach out to us before this meeting, but I guess they didn't get around to it. They wanted to do a quick, not like a long show or anything, just a few minutes about this program. And that might be something where someone who was involved in it could maybe also say a few words. But generally speaking, I'm sure there might be people that would want to talk to someone like you. So how do you prefer to be contacted, directly, or do you want to go through Solarize?
It doesn't matter. If whatever is convenient, if you want my email address, you're happy to have it and hand it out to people if they want. It's fine with me.
Yeah, okay. So if you wouldn't mind typing it in the chat.
I will do that right now.
Write it down as well.
So you mentioned KBBI. That's a great thing to bring up. we found that when there's an article, especially about Solarize, which is a very feel good, people making a difference together thing, it makes great news. People love it. And then as organizers, if you grab that and push it out through Facebook, your own channels, even like I would boost it as a company to let people know what's going on. That is a great synergy. So, but the first initial hit with the getting some sort of article, or we've had drone footage and then of us install. It's just people love solar. Who doesn't like making power from these panels sitting on the roof? It's people are excited about it. So it's yeah, but that any contacts you have with the media or any chances you have to create an article with them, it's usually a fun experience, and it's really helpful to the campaign.
I saw one of the
So it's another answer to your question, Caitlin.
Yeah, one of the reporters joined the our meeting tonight. So I think, yeah, the more we can get those stories out of folks who've done it and had good experience.
Yeah, yeah.
There's still that myth out there that it's not quite affordable.
Oh God,
yeah.
I hate. I have to answer those questions so often. I get cranky.
Yeah, I'm like, actually, it's
yes, it works in Alaska.
You can make right now. Yeah.
I had one silly question. I'm trying to convince my parents to look into this, and my mom's really hesitant about putting more holes in her roof. What can I say to her to make her think otherwise?
Yeah. The mounts have been going on to roofs around the world. In America, in 2016, we hit 1 million roofs. And shortly after that, we got to 2 million. I think it was about 2 years later. You don't get to 2 million roofs if you're, making roofs leak. There's great products